All right, so we're back here, Couch Coaches. Once again, we are here on our conclude our 2020 Power 5 -3 conference preview, where we're going to preview the Atlantic Coast Conference, a conference that is near and dear to my Mid-Atlantic heart. So we got our guy Zach here once again. Definitely appreciate you for these past 4 Saturdays? What we talked about it. Yeah, so this is our fourth preview. So we're going to talk about the ACC. So what's been going on, Zach?
Not much, man. Just excited for today, man. We got football for the first time all day. We have some Group of 5 games, some just Division 1 games. I'm excited. Memphis is going to be a great game tonight. SMU plays today. Marshall, while we're recording, is dominating. So I'm just excited to see football this week.
Yeah, and most definitely. Just a very great time. And, football is in the air. Everything is great at this point. And, man, we're just definitely looking forward to it as the season progresses. So one of the things that really came out this week before we, get into the preview, LSU wide receiver Ja'Marr Chase has opted out. And I want to get your opinion on it, because now, it's funny. It's like, as far as when we thought about opt out and how you see how it has progressed, where there was a concept of, like, remember when Javian Clowney had that play against Michigan and they wanted him to opt out for his final year. And we thought that was absurd. And then you look at guys, previous years down the line, like Christian McCaffrey, other guys who opted out of playing in bowl games. And then even loosely, Joey Bosa, who ended up getting hurt, the hamstring injury in September 2 years ago, and pretty much didn't play a game for Ohio State. And in other words, he kind of opted out in a sense. So do you think this Ja'Marr Chase situation, even in a post-COVID situation, is going to be a trend going forward?
I don't, but I want to start this by saying how big of a loss this is for LSU, man. I mean, I don't think there's a single player in the country on any team outside of maybe Trevor Lawrence that could opt out and have this big of an impact on a team. I mean, you look at Ja'Marr Chase, he won the Biletnikoff last year, best wide receiver in the entire country, over 1,700 yards, was averaging over 21 yards per catch. And now LSU is down officially 33 players from that team that took the field in January against Clemson. That's a lineup and a half. You haven't seen losses like this since the 2010 Auburn team lost. I believe it was almost 40 players from that roster that won the national championship in 2010. This is huge. And Coach O this week, this is important, said there were a few other players who haven't made their decisions yet. So LSU could not be, finished losing players. LSU, in my opinion, just went from a dark horse in the SEC, like I talked last week, where they might be able to win it, to they might not even survive the schedule this year. They could go 500. They could lose 4-5 games. They have to play Florida at Florida. They have to play Alabama. They have to go to Jordan-Hare and Auburn. They have to go to A&M down there in College Station. Brutal schedule. But to get to your direct question, I don't think this becomes a trend. I think, and the reason is because for at least the COVID season, it's been a trend. You've seen Micah Parsons at Penn State, Gregory Rousseau in Miami, Kenneth Gainwell at Memphis, Rashad Bateman out of Minnesota. They all opted out much earlier than Ja'Marr Chase did. But these projected first-round picks, why would you risk getting COVID? Why would you risk in this weird season? You didn't have proper preparation. You're going to have maybe limited rosters. You're going to have a lot of new people playing. I mean, Gus Malzahn at Auburn said he's going to have 3 different units prepared for each game in case people have to opt out for COVID or they get COVID the week of the game. So these players are putting a lot of money. They're putting their health. They're putting their NFL draft grade on the line for a season where a lot of people said there's already an asterisk next to the national championship. So if you win the Heisman, there's going to be an asterisk. Justin Fields didn't play. The whole Pac-12, Keaton Slovis didn't play. There's going to be an asterisk next to any bowl win. There might not even be enough bowl games for you to even play in a bowl game. So there's a lot of ifs. But for years to come, I can't see it because there's too many variables for me that play into this. It's different than opting out of a bowl game because a lot of the players who opt out of bowl games have already graduated. They've fulfilled their obligation to the university. I personally, I've gotten to this on our podcast. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. We'll be here all day. I don't like opting out for bowl games. I think it's selfish. It's putting you before your teammates. In certain situations, if you have an injury history, kind of like Leonard Fournette did, where he wasn't always 100% healthy, that's different. But if you just opt out to opt out, I have a problem with that. I wouldn't do it. But the thing with opting out of an entire season is, so are these players going to leave the university? Because if they're not playing, why should they keep their scholarship? Why should they keep their free housing? Why should they be able to use the facilities that these players get to use? Do they get treatment if they have an injury? Do they get the training staff? Do they get this any special treatment the players get? And, I think some players are going to want that degree, and that's going to keep them to stay. Because if you leave and opt out, the university has no prerogative to keep you. I mean, if you're a normal student and you tell the university, hey, I'm not going to class, I'm going to opt out and look for a job, they're not going to keep you on scholarship. That scholarship's gone. So why should a player be any different? And the university doesn't owe them anything after education if you opt out. So you can leave or pay tuition like everyone else. And the reason that this trend is really bad is, doesn't it go directly against the We Are United movement? Because we saw the players, they're asking for a 6-year scholarship commitment. They're asking for 6 years insurance, 6-year scholarships. If you only play a year or two, why does the university owe you 6 years of anything? You don't have any ties to that university in terms of the degree. You only played 1 year. So why does the university have to support you for 6 years? You're there to not only play football, but to get a degree. And I think this could really hurt student athletes in the long run coming down the pipeline. So I don't think it becomes a trend except in injury circumstances. You mentioned Joey Bosa. If he tears his ACL and is out for the year, yeah, go practice for the draft. But I don't think it becomes a trend in the long run because of stuff like that.
Yeah. And that's one thing too. And that's how, because and it's funny how, in the beginning, we looked at those type of situations where, okay, one person opts out, it becomes a trend. So that's one of the things where now guys are going to look like, well, if I'm a top 10 pick, well, we think Jamar, well, more than likely. But if anything crazy happened, it's almost a guarantee that he's going to be a top 10 pick. So you look at could this be a situation going forward? Like, hey, if I'm a top 10 guy, I'm, opting out. So that's another thing where, it's going to be interesting going forward, especially we'll see, of course, down the line when we have a post-COVID situation, but absolutely.
Right. It's going to be different. And, to address like the comments that they're playing for free and millions of dollars. I mean, these players technically aren't playing for free. Do they make a salary? No, and they shouldn't. And I think me and you talked about it on the Pac-12 episode about how if they're on salary, they can get fired. They can. There's a whole thing about, are the red shirts going to be okay with not getting paid as much as the starters? I promise you that's not going to happen. And same with the softball players and the baseball players. It can't happen. Some of these players make over $4,000 a month on stipends and Pell Grants and other stuff like that. Yes, they should make more off their name, image, likeness. That's going to be passed probably by next season. So they're going to be able to make money from advertisements, people wearing their jerseys and stuff like that. But to say that they're playing for free, like I think me and you did expand on this, but they get so much stuff. And they get stipends and they get free housing and they get all this stuff. To say that they're playing for free is just not exactly the truth.
Yeah, that's one of the things where it's funny because we look at it from the standpoint of, hey, these guys are making, these Power 5 schools are making billions of dollars. And then, like you're saying, even bringing up those different types of revenues, you're like, okay, they're getting pennies compared to essentially the coaches where they have multiple streams of income, where they get the income off of shoot, the logo companies like Nike, this and third, radio, everything, television, all this. But that's another thing too, where you think about it in the definition text, since they're not getting paid for free, but it's damn near free. I mean, to a point where
it's definitely.
And the thing about it too, where I do like the name, image, and likeness thing, because I think that makes it fair.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people, like we talked about on the Pac-12 preview, where I think a lot of people are going to be disappointed and to realize they're I would say worthless, but they're worthless a little bit. Like I can see like a guy like a Ja'Marr Chase, who is a guy who would essentially opt out. I think he would benefit very well in this type of model, where he can make some money off of that, because he can say, hey, this is an upcoming prospect. He could do certain things during certain events where he my other ball colleague. All right, so we're back here. You good, Zach?
Yeah, we're good.
Yeah, all right, perfect. So we'll go forward with this. So, of course, we know that in the Atlantic Coast Conference, all roads lead to Clemson, South Carolina, with the Clemson Tigers. So, who are the teams, in your personal opinion, are likely posed as a threat to Clemson?
I think there's an obvious one. I think you know where we're going with it. I'm sure you can jump on this bandwagon here, and that's the North Carolina Tar Heels, man. They are the biggest threat, and there might be a close second, but I don't even think they're that close. And the Tar Heels have arguably the second best offense in the conference and arguably a top 5 offense in the entire country. And I think the defense is what's really, really underrated in terms of talent. The offense ranks 5th in the entire country going into the season, while the defense is a top 45 defense. And I think this defense could be top 30 by the end of the year. I mean, a big problem for the Tar Heels was the lack of help on the back end of that defense in the secondary. Storm Duck, huge breakout player last year for the Tar Heels. He was a 3-star true freshman, and he ranked 3rd in the conference in terms of DBs for the highest graded defensive backs. 2 interceptions, returned 1 for a touchdown, had 5 pass breakups and 37 total tackles. He gets a huge upgrade on the other side of the field. I know you know this. Tony Grimes reclassified. He's going to be eligible to play this year. And if Mac Brown doesn't start this kid, I'm boycotting UNC football, because this kid, in my opinion, could be the best player on this North Carolina team, even over someone like Sam Howell. This kid is legit. He was a 5-star in the 2021 class. When he reclassified to 2020, he was still a top 40 player, which is unheard of when you reclassify like that to still be that highly rated. 6'1", 185, a perfect size to contribute immediately. His speed is what gets me so excited about him. He was clocked. I don't know if you know this. He was clocked accelerating to 19.1 miles per hour in less than 4 seconds on a play last year. That's in game, full pads. This kid got up to almost 20 miles an hour in less than 4 seconds. That is, I would pay so much money to be able to run that fast. People don't understand. That is flying. He racked up 4 interceptions in his last year of high school football. He's a ball hawk playmaker and has all the physical tools to be a real problem. And then you have someone like Desmond Evans. He's coming in at D end as a highly, highly touted recruit out of, I believe it was Alabama. I mean, they landed this kid over Clemson, Alabama, Auburn. Everybody wanted Desmond Evans. He's going to be an elite pass rusher immediately. And I think you'll like this statement. This North Carolina offense has so much potential and unproven talent. It could make a legendary jump similar to the LSU offense last year. I think that's how good and explosive this team. Do I think they're going to put up, the ridiculous numbers? Maybe not, but they can make that elite jump that takes this team to the next level. I know you love them. We all love them. Sam Howell at quarterback is a true superstar. And I was high on this kid. I believe we were covering UNC on the podcast week 3 last year, and I told my co-host, this kid's got the it factor, and I don't think I ever heard the end of it. All season, I was told that I was too in love with Sam Howell, but listen, second most valuable season for a quarterback since 2014, according to Pro Football Focus. That's how good this kid is. When you throw for over 3,600 yards, 38 touchdowns, and only 7 interceptions, I don't care. For a true freshman, those are unremarkable numbers. I mean, second in the ACC passing, only behind the obvious. First in the fourth in the NCAA in passing touchdowns. So top 5 in the entire country as a true freshman in passing touchdowns. And as a UNC fan, you can say this. He doesn't have the Clemson, LSU wide receivers that we see that were all 5 stars and everything. He's doing this with kids that were highly rated, but they're not the Jamar Chases. They're not, what's the kid, Justin Ross. They're not those type of players out of high school. And listen, people say I'm too high on him. This kid, as a true freshman, and I believe it was his 4th or 5th game, was 1 play away from beating Clemson last year, who went to the national championship. 1 2-point conversion away, and they beat Clemson. And listen, Daz Nuslam at wide receiver, he's back. I love this kid. He's a number 1 target. He ranked 1st in the country in 20-plus yard catches from the slot position in NCAA last year. Coming off of that over 1,000-yard season, 10 touchdowns. He runs a 4.4, so he has ridiculous deep threat speed, and his size makes him a horrible matchup for just about anybody throughout the conference and maybe even the country. Michael Carter, Javonte Williams, they're both back at running back. That takes a lot of pressure off of Howell. This team's loaded with talent that I think me and you could have an episode just on UNC if we wanted, is how deep this team is. And Chaz Surratt's back at linebacker. He was a first-team All-ACC selection last year. Don Chapman at safety. He really, really shined late in the year. He was young, inexperienced early in the season, got roasted for the first 6 weeks. The last 6 weeks was one of the best DBs in the ACC. North Carolina can compete. I don't think there's going to be any bigger stage than Charlotte, North Carolina this year, and North Carolina and Clemson should be on a collision course. There's one team I'll cover in a second that I think might be able to sneak in, but yeah, I'd like to hear your thoughts on UNC because I think UNC is that good of a team this year.
Oh yeah, I think the sky's the limit for this team. I think, especially last year, I think, like you said, going back and taking that leap where they've lost a lot of games that close margins, and I think it was combined was like 27 points.
Yes.
Something of that nature. And I'm like, you think about it now, this is the situation now. They've grown, they've matured, they know now how to win. And and some of those things could attribute to, just youth. It could have been anything, but they could clear that up. So I look at this team as and then now having a conference only schedule just helps it exponentially. I mean, especially if they have not an easy road, but it's not as tough as as it's. Then the beauty of this year where, I guess we would consider them 12th because that's where the confusion lies. Because, when we take out the Pac-12 in the Big Ten, so they would be ranked 12th in the country. So you're already there. So essentially, when you play Notre Dame on November 27th, you would assume that when we had that collision course per se, that Notre Dame would be within that same type of that same ranking per se. And then, of course, you're gonna move up. So to me, starting at 12 is amazing. And, because we don't have to worry about you guys. We would have to deal with you guys, and that could have helped us, and it could have hurt us. It could have been one of the type of situations where, having a loss like that early could potentially could have put, depends on the margin of victory, margin of loss. I mean, that could take us out of the top 25. I think we were like 18th prior. Right. So that could have been a situation where, so it's a lot of it too, where I think, you don't per se, this is like an unorthodox year where you just have to just stay the course, and you play your conference opponents, and you're just hoping that Notre Dame is still in the picture where they can a situation where you can validate it. And to me, as long as you get to Charlotte,
it don't matter.
It don't matter. It don't matter as long as you get to Charlotte, like you did 5 years ago, and on that BS on that BS call, onside kick call. I mean, if you get like that, and we know how they played last year, where they were pretty much converting a 2-point conversion away from winning this game, and putting the college football playoff in an axis where Clemson was pretty much rolling, and it almost felt like, in a sense, they were on cruise control. But I think Carolina, in essence, kind of gave them their biggest scare, besides obviously of LSU. So that's something that you got to look at. You're like, okay, well, this is a potential where going forward now. That Sam Howell, once again, he's definitely probably going to improve it once again. The 19-year-old phenom, and he's
grown
amazing.
Man, really.
Yeah.
Like for a sophomore quarterback, I don't think there's a better one in the country, and that's even coming from an Auburn fan who really likes Bo Nix. I mean, Keaton Slovis is up there, Jaden Daniels. There's not a better sophomore quarterback in the entire country other than Sam Howell, and I don't think there's. I would put him as a top 5 quarterback in the entire country right now. I mean, he's right up there. I mean, Trevor Lawrence has separated himself from the pack, but I think Sam Howell has an argument to be just as good as Justin Fields. I mean, if you put Sam Howell on that Ohio State team last year, I think Ohio State could beat Clemson.
All right.
That's just and so I think he could maybe even have an argument for a top 3 quarterback. It doesn't matter. This year he has a chance to prove it, because I think this UNC team last year was so young. And like you said, UNC didn't have any expectations last year. They found themselves up against Clemson. They were probably like, man, what is this? And then toward the end of the game, that Clemson experience ended up paying off. But this year, I don't think UNC is going to be tiptoeing into the ACC championship game if they get there. They're coming to knock off Clemson. And I think you're going to see a different mindset from UNC this year, which makes them so dangerous.
Yeah, because to me, the goal is get to Charlotte. I think once you get to Charlotte, get to Charlotte. Hashtag.
Exactly. Get to Charlotte.
Get to Charlotte. Because at this point, to me, I know how it's probably going to end up playing out. Clemson's going to be the bell of the ball, and we're just going to have to be the ones that have to break that glass slipper and let Clemson walk home to Clemson barefooted.
There you go. And I mean, speaking of a team that could ruin the party, man, Notre Dame is in the ACC this year. I think they're the only other team that realistically has a shot. Miami could have been a dark horse, but losing Gregory Rousseau, losing a DN like Rousseau, who is her projected top 5 pick, that's a huge, huge loss there. But Notre Dame might not be known for its defense, but this year they're going to have one of the best in the country. They're 10th in the country right now in defensive ranking going into the season. Their front 7 ranks top 11. Their secondary ranks top 25. Those are 2 great starting points for a defense, especially in the ACC. We're going to have to face people like Sam Howell, Trevor Lawrence, even De'Aaron King down there in Miami is going to be a huge factor. There's a player I want to cover later. That's this huge reason I like Notre Dame. We'll save him for a later segment. But Tariq Bracy, man, the DB at Notre Dame, he's back. He was ranked 1st in the country in contested targets last season. But he struggles making plays on the ball. He didn't get an interception in those, but he did break a lot of them up. So I want to see him take that step and become a ball hawk, and that's a real key for this back end of the secondary. Jeremiah Awusu, he's a linebacker ranked 5th in terms of overall grades in the last 6 weeks of the season for Pro Football Focus. 80 total tackles, over 13 for loss, 5.5 sacks, 2 forced fumbles. Kid's a playmaker. Darlin Hayes, DN, steps in for Julian Okawara, who left for the NFL, but he brings a lot of experience. A 5th-year senior, has over 80 total tackles, 6 sacks. He's played a lot. He hasn't really stepped into that starting role, but now he's forced into it. Can he take that next step? That's a huge thing. On offense, Ian Book's back. Ian Book is an elite quarterback. He doesn't get as much recognition because for some reason Notre Dame has this stigma that they're not an elite team, even though every year they're in the top 15 regardless. Notre Dame can make the plays. And Book's coming off of a 3,000-yard season, 34 touchdowns, only 6 interceptions. He was 6th in the country in passing touchdowns last year. But the problem is injuries to this offensive line have him the most sacked quarterback in the past 2 years. He also struggles to throw down the middle of the field. Those are 2 areas I need to see Notre Dame improve for me to put them over UNC or Clemson, which is why I have them 3rd right now. Luckily, Notre Dame's healthy now. They have the number 1 offensive line in the entire country going into this season. It starts with Liam Eichenbaum, a 6'6", 302-pound monster, allowed 0 sacks last year, only 3 quarterback hits and only 9 hurries on over 850 snaps. He ranked top 10 in the entire country in lowest pressure rate allowed, according to Pro Football Focus. Alongside him, 6'6", 317 offensive lineman Tommy Kramer at guard. He suffered a knee injury after only 7 games. In those 7 games, he did not allow a sack, only 1 quarterback hit, and only 3 hurries. That's elite production. And then finally, Robert Hainsey, 6'5", 300 pounds, was the team captain last year and won Offensive Lineman of the Year, but only played 8 games. That's how good he was. He allowed 0 sacks as well, 2 quarterback hits, and over 400 snaps. These 3 guys are the key. If Notre Dame's offensive line can stay healthy, that's huge for them. But injuries has always seemed to hold this team back, but a healthy Notre Dame team can beat anybody in the country. And so if they're healthy going into that matchup against UNC, going into that matchup against Clemson, those games are going to be brutal, brutal battles for the ACC, and I cannot wait to watch them.
Absolutely. So who are the sleepers? Who are the teams that, we talked about, as far as many people would suggest this conference is top heavy. So who are the teams that are like kind of in the middle and, as far as the sleeper teams of the ACC, in your opinion?
I hate that stigma because I think there's some really, really good teams in the ACC. I think they just don't give these teams a lot of respect. My first pick here has to be Louisville. I think Louisville is much, much better than experts and just average fans give them credit for. Mikhail Cunningham might be one of the best quarterbacks in the ACC. More on him a little bit later, but his weapons are why Louisville ranks 9th in terms of offensive production returning out of all 130 FBS teams. Tutu Atwell, back at wide receiver, he's ready to dominate. 70 catches, 1,200 yards receiving, 11 touchdowns, and averaged over 18 yards per catch. He was actually Pro Football Focus's highest ranked receiver last year, over Jamar Chase, over anyone else you want to put up there. He averaged 16 yards per catch just on screen passes alone. So this kid, once he's in space, he can go. Javian Hawkins, the running back, he's back. He's an explosive option out of the backfield. He rushed for over 1,500 yards last year, 9 touchdowns. He ranked 3rd in the ACC, 8th in the country in rushing yards. He was ranked 1st among FBS running backs in terms of explosive plays, 20 yards or over last year. This offense is elite at all levels. Mekhi Becton's a huge loss at offensive tackle. We saw him go, I believe, 14th to the Bucks this NFL draft. This offense is a threat to go put 40-50 on just about anybody. The defense is why they're a sleeper, not a contender to me. Question marks everywhere, but this team has littered potential at almost every level. Rajay Burns, transferred from Ohio State, has been one of the most consistent players on this defense. Over 120 tackles, 12.5 for loss in his first 2 seasons at Louisville. I'm looking for him to make that final step in one of his last seasons of eligibility. Anthony Johnson, back at DB, 3rd year starting. He has 2 interceptions, 8 pass breakups, 41 total tackles his first 2 years. As a junior, you expect to see him take a leadership role. Can he do that? Huge question mark. Louisville has so much untapped potential, man. I think they're hyper athletic on the defensive side of the ball and especially the offensive side of the ball. But things have to click right for Louisville to be a contender. So that's why I have them as a sleeper in the ACC this year. And so if you're a fan of any of the top 3 teams I talked about, Louisville is a game you want to circle on your schedule and say, I need to make sure we get past this week of the season.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Louisville, I think last year shocked a lot of people, man. They were coming off, I believe, a 2-10 year in Petrino's last year. And then they went all the way to the Belk Bowl last year, ran into a buzzsaw that was Lynn Bowden Jr. in Kentucky. You can't fault them there. They went to overtime. But for Louisville to be a third-ranked team, pretty outstanding.
Yeah. So who are the players to watch in the ACC?
So I feel like I always have to start with the quarterback here. Mikhail Cunningham for Louisville. I mentioned him a little bit just last segment. He has the ability to be a top 3 quarterback in this conference, even with Ian Book, Sam Howell, Trevor Lawrence. After Lawrence leaves, I think him and Sam Howell are going to be the gold standard in the ACC in terms of quarterback. They bring 2 different skill sets. Cunningham's the dual threat guy. Sam Howell is the future NFL top pick, in my opinion. But last season was Cunningham's first season, and he was an intricate part of why Louisville made that jump from 2-10 to bowl eligible team. 62% completion percentage, 2,000 yards passing, 22 touchdowns, only 5 interceptions. He ranked 5th in the ACC in passing touchdowns and was actually top 5 in rushing yards per attempt in 2018, his true freshman year. That's outrageous for a quarterback. That includes running backs, everything. He is that explosive. His ability to extend plays out of the pocket is why I really, really like this kid. I watched a few games of Louisville last year, and he popped off the screen. If the defenses don't respect him, they don't have a QB spy, they don't set the edge, this kid's going to make big, big plays outside the pocket. He's not as explosive as Lamar Jackson, but he's a better thrower so far in college than Lamar Jackson was. And on design runs, read options, speed options, whatever you want to say, he averaged over 7 yards per carry on read option plays. His accuracy and ability to avoid turnovers is why Cunningham is going to make a serious run at ACC Player of the Year this year or next. He has, like I said, Javian Hawkins. Man, I'm terrible with that name, but it's going to make teams be honest, because if you take Cunningham out, Hawkins can burn you up the middle. The kid's that good. He's a player to watch and is really the main reason why I picked Louisville as my dark horse. But you'll like this kid, Javonte Williams, UNC. He wasn't the main running back for UNC last year per se, but I think he is going to be the player that helps Sam Howell the most in the long run. He was a 1-2 combo with Michael Carter, like I mentioned earlier. But this year, I expect Williams to take that huge step in the right direction. Over 1,000 yards, 6 touchdowns. He was averaging 10 yards per catch as a running back. Just explosion, and more explosion. I think he's going to be even better. Top 10 in rushing yards, yards per attempt, yards from scrimmage in the conference last year. According to Pro Football Focus, he had 5 or more yards after contact on over 30% of his runs. That speaks to his physicality at only 5'10", 230. He's not a huge kid, but man, this kid is built like a bus. I mean, if you don't tackle him like you're supposed to, this kid's going to make you pay. I think he's going to be a huge reason why UNC takes that next step, because Howell needs some help on that offensive side of the ball. If defenses sit back, Sam Howell is going to struggle this year because they're going to have to establish a run game to help him out. And finally, my last guy, this kid from Notre Dame who I'm really high on, I think he's the best defensive player in the ACC, is safety Kyle Hamilton out of Notre Dame. I know this is a huge jump in terms of like saying he's the best player in the ACC in term on the defensive side of the ball, but could be the best pure safety. He hasn't started for Notre Dame as a true freshman last year. 41 total tackles, 4 interceptions, one of those returned for a touchdown, and 6 pass breakups. He started 1 game last year. He ranked first for independent teams in interceptions and top 5 in terms of pass breakups. He's 6'4", 220 already as a true sophomore now. He's a dynamic playmaker. He's a ball hawk, and he's disciplined. He's physical. He has everything you want in terms of a free safety back there. He's so big that he can step in and also rush off the edge at 6'4", 230. That's the size of some average defensive ends in some conferences. And this kid's athletic enough to play deep safety. He graded out at almost 90% in cover snaps, according to Pro Football Focus, which ranked best in the country for a true safety. He's going to step into a starting role this year finally. And with that wealth of experience he got from just playing in select situations last year, I think he's going to make a huge jump in production. He's going to have more opportunities to make plays, and I think he'll be an all ACC selection by the end of the year. He might even lead the conference in interceptions. He's going to feast on some of the mediocre quarterback play because, yes, on the top end, there's Ian Book, Sam Howell, Trevor Lawrence. But on the lower end of this conference, Virginia is going to have a new quarterback. What is Florida State going to look like? Probably not great. Syracuse is not going to have a very good quarterback. Boston College's quarterback situation is a big question mark. He has time to really make those quarterbacks play. And for Hamilton to go against Lawrence and Howell is going to be elite versus elite. And I cannot wait to see those matchups.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's talk about the matchups in this conference. As great segue there, Zach. Well, so one of the matchups to look forward to in the ACC this season.
I think the first one, I went in order here in terms of weeks. I think week 2, an unconventional pick, but one you're going to want to circle on your calendar, Miami at Louisville. I think this is a good matchup. Gregory Rousseau's out, so Miami is a huge question mark in the ACC. How big of a loss is that? And we're going to find out if Louisville is a real contender. If they slip up here in Miami, you can write them off as just another average team in the ACC. What if De'Aaron King goes off? He shows what he showed 2 years ago at Houston. Miami's going to be a real threat to some people, and you're going to have to watch out for them. I think this is going to determine, can either of these teams be a dark horse? If they both come out and play like crap, then just write them both off because that's not a good look if they're struggling with each other. So Miami-Louisville is going to really determine that. I would say 4 through 6 range. Who's going to fall in there? And this game goes a long way into determining who is going to be the good teams, not the great teams in the ACC. And then Virginia Tech at UNC week 5. If I had to pick a second sleeper, it's going to be Virginia Tech. I think they're really, really good at multiple areas. I think they could be the most balanced team. I believe every single position but one ranks inside the top 40 in terms of returning production for Virginia Tech. They return their quarterback. They get Raheem Blackshear out of Rutgers as a transfer running back. Huge pickup there. This is going to go in a long way in determining, has Sam Howell improved as much as someone like myself and you think he can? Is Javonte Williams stepping up? Is that defense taking that next elite step so they can compete for a national championship? Virginia Tech's not going to come in there and just roll over for UNC. UNC is going to have to win this game by playing well, by showing they matured throughout this offseason. So this is the first big test for UNC that I see. Next, week 8, 2 teams I've already mentioned, Virginia Tech at Louisville. Who's going to be that number 4 team that can maybe sneak into Charlotte? Is it going to be Virginia Tech? Is it going to be Louisville? This is a huge test for both of these teams. So I'm looking forward to this matchup. And then my last 2, man, you know what was coming. Clemson at Notre Dame week 9, Notre Dame at UNC week 12. These 2 games are just play-in games for Charlotte. If Notre Dame beats Clemson, all hell could break loose because Clemson doesn't get a shot at UNC. So if UNC beats Notre Dame and UNC are going to the ACC championship. So Clemson and Notre Dame are really going to determine who goes to Charlotte. Let's say Notre Dame loses. That makes that UNC Notre Dame game a play-in game to see who goes to Charlotte to face Clemson. So these 2 games, I deem them as playoff games for the ACC. You have to win these games to show you deserve to go to Charlotte. Notre Dame gets the lucky fortune to really control their own destiny. Clemson doesn't really get to control their destiny. If they lose at Notre Dame, they're kind of at the mercy of UNC, same way flip for UNC. They don't get to play Clemson. So Notre Dame is really in control of who gets to go to Charlotte for this conference, and that could be scary for some ACC fans that the newest team added to the conference really might determine more like this ACC championship more than any other team in the entire conference.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting. And I think I'm going to use the hashtag Get to Charlotte for every week for my
Yes.
Tar Heels. So definitely, I think I'm going to coin that hashtag. But you hear it now, and and Zach here is co-signing and know this is an original hashtag. So now the question is, who will get to Charlotte? Who will go to Charlotte and actually win the Atlantic Coast Conference?
I think I'm gonna go out on a real limb here and pick Clemson. As much as it breaks my heart, man. I was on this UNC train last year, week 3. I was like, next year this team is going to dominate. But this Clemson team, man. Like I was sitting here yesterday taking notes, getting ready for this, appearance. I was just like, man, I really want to pick UNC. I was like, I'm gonna break down these positions, and I'm just like, I can't find a way for UNC to win this game. I mean, I've broken down, UNC. I've broken down Louisville, broken down Notre Dame. I got to break down Clemson here a little bit just to justify my pick because it breaks my heart. But I mean, Trevor Lawrence, man. I mean, he counts for half of the reason of this pick. I mean, I know I'm not the only one that thinks this, but I know there's a lot of people that fight it. I think he's already probably the best quarterback of all time that we've ever seen play college football. Like, this kid's better than Peyton Manning at Tennessee. This kid's better than Tim Tebow at Florida, better than Cam Newton at Auburn for 1 year, better than Joe Burrow at LSU for 2 years. I mean, this kid is the real deal. I mean, in terms of just raw talent, Trevor Lawrence is probably the best quarterback of all time. And, the only thing I want to say is, I mean, people are saying he had an off year last year. And if throwing for 3,600 yards, 36 touchdowns is an off year, then sign me up every year as an Auburn fan for me to have a falling off quarterback. Because if that's your off year, then what is your potential at that position? I mean, what do you want him to do more? He has a running ability. Ask Ohio State what happens if you don't want to guard him on the read option. He burned Ohio State for 70 yards at 6'6". And he's lanky. He doesn't look like he could do that, but he can. And he's 29-1 in his college career. And that's after being on a 43-game win streak in high school and only losing one high school game, which was in the semifinals of a playoff. And if he, you can say he has 5 stars. You can say he shrank against LSU. But the fact that he dominates analytically and goes out and wins is what separates him. He is the best winner we've ever seen in college football. Let's just say he wins out and wins the national championship this year, he will be 43-1 with 3 national championship appearances and 2 national championships. Is there even an argument that he's the greatest college football player we've ever seen, or college quarterback? I don't think there's anybody in the world who can say that unless you have an agenda that you're trying to push. If you're a Florida fan, that's fine. I know that you're always going to say Tim Tebow is the greatest quarterback of all time. My co-host Brandon, he's an LSU fan. Joe Burrow till he dies. I got you. But we saw how good Deshaun Watson was. We see how good Deshaun Watson is. So I think today, right before we recorded, he just signed another 4-year deal. Is the second highest paid quarterback behind Mahomes in the NFL. Trevor Lawrence took what Clemson was and took it to a level that no one ever thought that a school like Clemson Tigers could ever be. He obliterated the ACC's perception. You said the ACC's top heavy. That's no one's fault but Trevor Lawrence and Clemson. And he's made teams as a true freshman. Notre Dame and Alabama in 2018 were good teams. He put up 46 points on that Alabama defense. That was averaging, giving up like 9 points a game. Dominated them. Dominated Notre Dame, beat Ohio State last year. I mean, this kid in the biggest moment shines the brightest. LSU was a team of destiny last year. And if you ask any NFL scout, any college head coach, who would you rather have, Joe Burrow or Trevor Lawrence? I would bet money that outside of Coach O, every single one of them would take Trevor Lawrence. And, I don't want to harp on him too much. Travis Etienne's also back for Clemson. 2 straight years of 1,600 yards rushing. The loss of Justin Ross is huge. He had the back issue. He'll be back next year, maybe. I hope this kid stays safe. I don't want to see him go out there and break his back or something like that. That would break my heart to see. I never want to see anyone get hurt. So I hope Justin Ross takes time to get healthy. They bring in Joe Nagata, a 5-star wide receiver. They still have Amari Rodgers. And according to Pro Football Focus, Nagata and Lawrence last year ranked as the number 2 quarterback wide receiver connection in the entire country behind Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. On defense, Mike Jones Jr. replaces Isaiah Simmons. He's an Isaiah Simmons prototype. You got Nolan Turner returning at safety. 5-star Xavier Thomas at the defensive end spot coming for his junior year. Then, as true freshmen, you have the number 1 player in the country, Brian Barisi, coming in at defensive tackle. You got Miles Murphy, number 7 player in the country, coming in at the other defensive end. You have a 5-star linebacker, Trenton Simpson, who was the number 1 player in North Carolina last year, who was committed to Auburn. They stole him from Auburn. UNC thought they had a shot, and Clemson just said, "Oh, hey, we'll take him. Don't worry about it." He was one of their last commits, and they weren't even recruiting him till the last weekend of signing day, and he just goes to Clemson. So, Barisi, 82.5 tackles for loss and 35 sacks throughout his high school career as a defensive tackle is what they're getting there. Miles Murphy, 20.5 sacks in his 2 years of high school football, and Simpson played both ways. He played linebacker and running back full time. He never came off the field. Had 20 sacks last year after playing both ways, and averaged over 8 yards per carry in his senior year of high school last year. And you're telling me that Clemson is gonna get beat by anybody? I don't. This Clemson team is probably the best one they've had in Dabo Swinney's tenure, and they're gonna win the ACC. They should. I told my friend today before we were recording, if Clemson doesn't go undefeated and win the Natty, Dabo failed as a coach this year. This team is so talented. If Dabo screws this up and they don't win the national championship, that should fall directly on his resume. That's how good this team is. And they're just better than every other team in the country. And listen, I hope I'm wrong. Part of me really, really wants to see UNC win the Natty this year. I'm going to be the biggest UNC fan on this podcast. So y'all tune into the Blue Bloods because I am going to be rooting for UNC. But listen, my uncle works up here in Clemson. I've been talking to him about what players look like in spring practice, or I guess fall practice. And Brian Barisi and these guys are the real deal. And outside of UNC, and maybe Notre Dame, I don't see a team getting within maybe 21 points of Clemson this year. Is how good they are. And I know that breaks your heart, man, but listen, I'm coming from a good place because I want UNC to win so bad.
Yeah. And matter of fact, I know Clemson is loaded. I know, and actually it's a guy on there that come from Virginia, from my area, Malcolm Green, the cornerback. Yep. From Highland Springs, Virginia, and he's a freshman All-American. So I see the potential with that, and I know Clemson. They don't rebuild, they reload. The 2 straight years. This is what breaks my heart. They've landed the number 1 player in the state of Alabama. Justin Ross, number 1 player in the state of Alabama, didn't go to Alabama or Auburn. E.J. Williams steps in as a true freshman this year from the same high school Justin Ross went to, goes to Clemson. So Clemson is stealing North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, Alabama, California. They don't care. They're just going out and getting these guys, and it blows my mind that they can do this. Yeah, I know, and they're all over the place. And and I think, like you said, going back to Trevor Lawrence's point, it's just he was so good his freshman year. It was somewhat of I call it a precipitous drop, even though it's not a bad of a drop. So, right. And it's funny because it's like we looked at the Kelly Bryant move, and then once Trevor Lawrence got on the field the first week, we didn't bet our eyes at all. We were like, okay, now this makes sense. Okay, now this makes sense. Like he should have did this a little earlier.
Yeah, well, my uncle who's up there working with the team, he was telling me in spring practice that year before, like when Lawrence first got on campus, he said, I think Clemson is going to win 3 out of the 4 next national championships. Right now, they're 1 for 2 going to both of them. And so, and he tells me, I don't want to be the one to break this news. I said it on our podcast. There's a lot of rumors. Lawrence isn't going to the draft after this year. Lawrence is going to take that extra year of eligibility and come back, because you saw it happen with the 3 defensive linemen that were for Klein Farrell, Dexter Lawrence, and I forget the other one's name. I'm blanking on him, but yeah, there were
Dexter. No, you said Dexter Lawrence.
Yeah, it was Dexter Lawrence, Klein Farrell, and it was 42 Christian Wilkins.
Christian Wilkins, yes,
yeah. All 3 of them, they were projected top 15 picks. They all came back. Isaiah Simmons almost came back. You saw Travis Etienne this year come back. There's strong rumors around that campus that Trevor Lawrence isn't going to declare for the draft. And listen, if Trevor Lawrence comes back for another year of college football, all hell is going to break loose.
Cancel Christmas and 2021. Oh, boy.
Because next year, I really think if Trevor Lawrence doesn't come back, my pick for the Heisman will be Sam Howell. But if Trevor Lawrence comes back, I'm going to have a tough time not thinking a senior year Trevor Lawrence can not win the Heisman, because I think he has a good shot this year. And I think it's going to be a situation, as much as it sucks, because I hate how the Heisman works, because I don't think a quarterback – okay, so this year, me and my co-host talk about this off camera. If you look back at, let's say, from 2000 to now or 2010 to now, how many years has a quarterback really been the best player in college football? I think Joe Burrow this year probably was the best player in college football. I think Cam Newton in 2010 probably was the best player in college football. But outside of those two, I'm not completely sure. I mean, you look at some like the year Mark Ingram won in 2009. Ndamukong Suh was the best player in college football, and it wasn't even a debate, but they gave it to an offensive player. You look at other years where you have like a DB who's dominating, or you have a defensive lineman or something like that. I mean, any other year, Chase Young probably should have finished second to Joe Burrow in the Heisman, because I think he was that good at Ohio State. I mean, you look at all these other players. I mean, how is Travis Etienne not getting Heisman votes? He's put up almost 2,000 yards of total yards in 2 straight years, and no one even bats an eye.
Yeah. And
the Heisman bothers me, but I think they give it to Trevor Lawrence this year just based on achievement. You saw it happen with Tim Tebow. They always gave him like a top 2 position, and they did it one last time. When you have a great football player like this, they're not going to let Trevor Lawrence leave, because I think what's going to happen is the Peyton Manning effect. How many voters are kicking themselves that they didn't give Peyton Manning a Heisman? Every single one of them. When they gave it to Charles Woodson, they're not going to let the same thing happen again to Trevor Lawrence. They're giving Trevor Lawrence the Heisman this year. I don't care if he puts up less stats. I don't care if someone sets Joe Burrow's records. They're going to give it to Trevor Lawrence, just to make sure that he has one, because they don't want to look back and be like, well, man, like Joe Burrow turned out to be Jamarcus Russell in the NFL, and here Trevor Lawrence is going to be a future NFL Hall of Famer, and he didn't have a Heisman. And Jamarcus Russell's a whole other thing. He's from my hometown in Mobile. Wow. And he was like supposed to be the next one, and it did turn out very well, to say the least.
Yeah. And we've had a great previews. So the final question of my 2020 Power 5 -3 preview. Who are your college football playoff predictions? Who are your 4 in, your 2 out, and your national champion?
Oh, man. It breaks my heart. I was writing this out earlier today, and it really, really broke my heart. I have Clemson as the number 1 seed. As much as I want to pick UNC or somebody, Clemson's gonna win the national championship. I'm just gonna spoil that now. Clemson's winning the Natty. They're the number 1 seed. I have Florida as the number 2 seed coming out of the SEC. I think they get in. And this one tore on me. We did the prediction last week with Oklahoma State. I'm still going back and forth, and it breaks my heart. But I picked Oklahoma last week, and I was thinking about, we're doing research for my own podcast, and I've been talking to some people down there. I'm going to switch here. I never do this. I'm going with Oklahoma State, actually, as my 3 seed. I'm going to pick them over Oklahoma. Apparently, Gundy's done a really, really good job of getting that team back in order. I don't know what he did. I need to reach out to Chuba Hubbard or somebody, try to get him on the podcast, because I don't know what he told those players to get them on it. And I don't know if anyone knows, they also have a documentary series out on ESPN Plus called, it's like The Journey or something like that. And those players looked locked in, man. And, part of me really wants to say Oklahoma, but I'm going to go with Oklahoma State. And 4, as much as it breaks my heart, I think Alabama gets in somehow, some way. They're not going to keep Alabama out. They almost tried to put them in last year. even without Tua and all this stuff. So Alabama's going to the 4 seed. My first 2 out, I have Oklahoma at 5. Mm-hmm. I think Oklahoma goes at 5. And for 6, I have UNC. I think UNC is going to fall in the 6th place. They're probably going to be up there. They're going to lose to Clemson. Oklahoma is going to lose to Oklahoma State. So those 2 teams fall there. And then I think right behind them, they'll be like Auburn, Cincinnati, Notre Dame, those teams that were one or 2 games out of the conference championship. But all the conferences are going to be represented. But I think they'll give that 4th place to the 2nd best SEC team. And if they can find a way to give Alabama an invite, they're going to give Alabama an invite. And I think you even know that. Everyone listening knows that. If Alabama has a way in, they're going to get in. And I think Florida will beat Oklahoma State. I think Clemson will beat Alabama. And Clemson will beat Florida to win the national championship. And it kills me because I want to put Auburn. I want to put UNC, but – Clemson's too good. Florida has all that talent, like I talked about in the SEC episode. Alabama's Alabama, and Oklahoma State, Oklahoma is going to be the steepest, most competitive conference championship race. And if Oklahoma makes it, I won't be surprised. But I think when you have the best wide receiver, the best running back, the more experienced offensive line, and the better secondary, I think that will win the Big 12 over just an explosive quarterback like Spencer Rattler.
Yeah, absolutely. And we definitely thank you for coming on these past couple of weeks for the previews. So where can they find you on social media?
Yeah, you can find the BlueBloods CFB podcast everywhere, guys. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, literally anywhere you listen to podcasts. On YouTube, just go to the BlueBloods CFB podcast. We should be on there. All our old episodes are on there. Interviews, live streams. We do a live stream called The Audible every few weeks. We just did one last week, so check that out. Twitter, it's at the __ Blue Bloods. Instagram at the _ Blue Bloods. Facebook at the Blue Bloods Pod. You can find us all on there, man. Our website's the bluebloodspod.com. You can find links to everywhere you can find the podcast, articles that me and my co-host Brandon writes. Man, we appreciate all y'all support, and definitely support Couch Coach Live while you're at it too. And I definitely look forward to being on again, man. I love talking college football.
Yeah, and we're gonna talk because I got some little ideas cooking. So we definitely, this will not be the last time you'll see my man Zach and talk about college football. So we definitely, once again, we definitely appreciate you for these 4 great weeks of college football insight. You have made everyone in America smarter than water polo when it comes to college football. So definitely appreciate you, and we definitely we're gonna work on some things too. So don't
y'all stay tuned for that.
We're gonna definitely stay in tune, guys, and we'll definitely keep you updated once everything with all that, see how that goes. But this has been this week's Couch Coach Live ACC preview. And we thank you guys, and we're looking forward to another great college football season. And man, enjoy the games.